Well, ladies and gentlemen, it would appear as if just days after their election, Canada is pretty much imploding right now. You see, right at this very moment, there is massive civil unrest unfolding up in Canada, with Mark Carney voters feeling immediately betrayed, Canadian Conservatives feeling understandably disgruntled, and Albertans pushing to split off from Canada altogether. So folks, we are going to have a lot to talk about today, but first, let's try to summarize why Mark Carney won the election in the first place. Take a look at this.
I think who I voted for would be the best to take care of Trump, because Trump is, I'm sorry to say, an ass, and he shouldn't even be president of the United States. But because he is, we need a strong person so that we could stand strong.
So folks, that right there is pretty much the entire reason why Mark Carney won the election. Millions of Canadians were effectively fear-mongered into hating President Trump, and they were deceived into believing that Mark Carney was going to be the guy who would fight President Trump tooth and nail. But as we now know, it only took Mark Carney less than 48 hours after winning the election to call up President Trump in order to beg for a new deal. Take a look at this.
And yesterday he spoke about American betrayal. Are you interested in rebuilding relations with Canada? And if so, how?
No, well, I think we're going to have a great relationship. He called me up yesterday. He said, "Let's make a deal." You know, he was running for office. They both hated Trump, and it was the one that hated Trump, I think, the least that won. I actually think the conservative hated me much more than the so-called liberal. He's a pretty liberal guy.
Why do you think?
No, I spoke to him yesterday. Couldn't have been nicer, and I congratulated him. You know, it was a very mixed signal because it's almost even, which makes it very complicated for the country. It's a pretty tight race, but he's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
So ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Not only has Prime Minister Mark Carney already called President Trump to de-escalate the ongoing trade war, but he's also literally flying down to the White House to have a one-on-one meeting next week. So like I said, right now, liberal Canadians are feeling totally betrayed. They voted for a guy who promised to stand strong against President Trump, but within 48 hours of winning the election, he's already capitulating to President Trump. Mark Carney's entire campaign was built on resisting President Trump's tariffs, resisting President Trump's border policies, and resisting President Trump's American energy dominance, and now he's begging President Trump for a deal. But now, check this out. You see, it's not just the liberal Canadians that are upset right now. In fact, pretty much all the other Canadians are pissed off right now too. But before we break all of that down, I do want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, folks, think about this for a second. Canadians got so fed up with Justin Trudeau that they called an emergency election. Canadians came together and overwhelmingly said, "We are done with our incompetent liberal leadership." And then what did they do? They replaced Justin Trudeau with yet another incompetent globalist from the Liberal Party. Really, it's absolutely astounding. So yeah, right now, Canadian Conservatives are just a little bit pissed off. In fact, in Alberta, people are so pissed off that they're trying to separate from the rest of the country altogether. Right now, there's a massive petition making the rounds with over 209,000 signatures calling for Alberta to officially break away. Now, would Alberta join the United States? Would it become its own country? Who knows? But the point is very clear. People are fed up with being ruled by a party that doesn't speak for them. And you know what? Let's be honest here. Mark Carney is the pure definition of a weak leader. He shifts with whatever way the wind is blowing, sells out to the highest bidder, and clearly has no principles beyond whatever earns him the most praise from the global elites. Now, unfortunately, Canadians are stuck with this guy for the next 4 years, and with the way the world is currently unraveling, a weak leader like Carney is the last kind of person you'd want manning the helm. So what's his best move right now? Well, if he's smart, he'll try to make amends with the one man who actually has the leverage to fix this entire mess, and that man is President Donald Trump. Because keep in mind, this entire situation between the United States and Canada all started when President Trump asked Canada to contribute $2 billion to help secure our shared border. And instead of doing that, Carney laughed in his face and proposed spending $30.9 billion on some Trump-proof defense budget. And so, as it would turn out, that arrogance didn't age well. Now, Prime Minister Carney is crawling back, with Canadians of all walks of life being absolutely pissed. This is probably the most blatant example of political buyer's remorse in recent global history. Like we said earlier, Canadian progressives are angry that Carney, who they thought was going to be tough against President Trump, has now capitulated. Canadian conservatives are angry that they've got to deal with another 4 years of incompetent liberal leadership after they just got rid of Justin Trudeau. And an entire Canadian province, Alberta, is actively trying to exit the country altogether because they're so upset with the way the country is currently headed. Seriously, right now there are hundreds of thousands of Canadians that would rather secede from the country altogether than deal with another 4 years of incompetent progressive leadership. And just to be clear, these Canadians aren't traitors or anything like that. No, these are all Canadians that want Canada to be put first, as they should, as opposed to China or a bunch of rootless globalists, because we all know how much Prime Minister Carney loves the CCP. We've all seen his very suspicious ties to Beijing, and I'll tell you what, it probably doesn't bode well for Canada. Really, this all just speaks volumes to how terrible it is to have a weak leader that doesn't truly put the needs of his own country in the forefront of his decision-making. So, ladies and gentlemen, who knows what's going to unfold up in Canada, but down here in the US, there's one thing we know for certain. We are putting America first. Now, folks, before we wrap up with today's video, I want to say real quick that I've actually gone ahead and made a community Facebook page where I'll be posting additional news and updates as it relates to all of this. So if you guys use Facebook, check out the pinned comment down below and give that page a follow. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there. As I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton with my daily struggle here on YouTube. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.